ado, please let's welcome Hafiz, who works with the National Insurance Commission, to take over.
Thank you very much, Florence. Good morning to everyone. It's very exciting to have you this morning. The National Insurance Commission is happy to present to the Insurtech firms that have been selected on the Hello, can everyone hear me online? Hello, good morning, everyone. Exciting morning. We are happy that everybody is here. The National Insurance Commission. My name is Mohammed Hafiz Isahaku, and I head the Innovation Hub. Mr. Kofi Andor, he is online. Once we start, as we go along, he would give his remarks. Asumundi, he's of the FSD. He's present with us here. Let me state that the National Insurance Commission is the regulatory body in Ghana. In the last few years, the National Insurance Commission has done a lot in ensuring that innovation takes the center stage of our insurance markets. And so today, we'll take you through the regulatory requirements for Insurtechs firms in Ghana. And just by way of starters, I would, can we have the presentation? I'll take you through the presentation outline, and then we go through the process. While we wait for that, today, our conversation will largely center. We know that there is a new law that has replaced Insurance Act 724. We'll go through the essential requirements in that act that has effects on innovation and how that affects our activities as Insurtech firms. And we'll also go through the draft regulations on regulatory sandbox. I believe that some of you have heard about sandbox environments. Ghana is creating one, and we'll go through that. We would also go through the very essential requirements that are in the sandbox environment and how it would affect you going forward. And we'll also look at the criteria of entry into the sandbox environment. And then while you go through the testing process and you are out, how do you exit the market and how do you scale up and become a competitive Insurtech firm in the insurance space? So we'll go through all of that. And I believe that we would have some conversation around its effect on you. While I wait for the presentation, I would just want to add that we are very excited to have all of you, and we believe that whatever discussions we'd have here would have impacts on your business as you compete among yourself in this space. And I believe that we would have a very interesting discussion this morning. Is it up? Okay, so let me also state that the National Insurance Commission got the Insurance Act 1061 introduced at the close of 2021. That Insurance Act has essential requirements that makes innovation an anchor in deepening insurance access and also deepening insurance penetration. And as people of technology and innovation, we expect that agreement operations, you will also have space to operate on our markets. In the last few years, we have had challenges having innovative firms operating on our market, and we'll see how the new Insurance Act creates provisions for Insurtech firms to operate in the Ghanaian space. Okay, we now have our slides. Can you go to just show the slides? All right, so just by way of overview, our conversation will center on the regulatory overview, the Insurance Act, and the draft directives and on innovations. We'll also look at the features of the draft sandbox environment in Ghana, and then the architecture of the regulatory sandbox, what is contained in that. We also have conversations around the terms of participation in the sandbox environment. How do you become a party to it, and how do you exit the sandbox space? And then post-implementation, we'll look at how you get yourself into the insurance space in Ghana, and etc. Now, with the regulatory overview, the Insurance Act 724/2006 has been repealed. So essentially, that was the act that we had in Ghana, but we have some challenges around it. And like I reiterated earlier on, those challenges were essentially not allowing or not having space for innovators and tech firms to be able to operate on our insurance market. And so the new Insurance Act has a lot of provisions that would allow Insurtechs to play on the Ghanaian insurance market. And in terms of the guidelines under 724, because the Act did not have provisions that enabled Insurtechs to operate on our market, the National Insurance Commission were able to issue a number of directives and guidelines, which was now 724. We had the microinsurance guidelines that allowed the operations of some firms in the microinsurance area. Licensed technical service providers, they were able to have partnerships with some insurance companies to sell microinsurance products. Then we also had guidelines for the operation of mobile insurance. You know, the Ghanaian market has a lot of mobile telephony penetration. And so we allow some partnership with mobile telephony insurance. So these were some of the things that we did under Act 724. Nonetheless, there were limitations. So the new Insurance Act has essential requirements that improve upon this. And so some of the key things that have happened in this new Act is that we have increased the minimum capital requirement for regulated insurance firms. So you would notice that when you operate in an insurance space, you should have a capital requirement. In Ghana, now the new capital requirement for insurers has been increased from 15 million to about 50 million. For reinsurance companies, it has also been increased to about 125 million. And then insurance intermediaries to have increased. The essence of all of this is to build the capacities of insurance companies to be able to take bigger risks and to be able to absorb a lot of the risks we have in Ghana. Then a number of new insurance databases have been built by the regulator. especially around the operations of insurances that are tariff-based. So in Ghana, for example, motor insurance, we now have the motor insurance database, which is driven by technology and IT that allows for all insurance companies to have a central database for underwriting motor. The reason is that we do not want undercutting or firms to engage in practices that are not fair to all. And so the motor insurance database is one of the key innovations that the regulator has done itself good, and we have had that in the industry. We also have the marine insurance database that has also been developed. So these are some of the key things that the regulator has done in the last few years to improve upon innovation and technology in our market space. There have also been several market conduct rules that have been issued. Some are making under this. Then, presently, we have the draft rules and innovative insurance intermediaries to operate on our markets. And all of these provisions need to have impetus. And to do that, we'll regulations set out the details that are required to allow these innovative insurers and innovative insurtech firms to operate. I believe that insurtech firms would want to operate on our market. And so we'll look at some of these key that to so the guidelines I said earlier on inclusion, allow for access to insurance, and to also innovators and insurtech firms to operate on our space. Now, a regulatory sandbox is a framework that gives services in a manner that would not expose them, and so the regulator would provide limited access to these insurtech firms to produce a small and they will not negatively affect them.
Can you hear us online? Can you hear us online?
No, we can't. We're really struggling to hear you.
So you haven't heard anything so far?
So clearly what we can hear is that we're hearing about the breaks presentation. So clearly we're hearing, but I mean, it's not that audible. There are a lot of breaks in there.
Okay, so I would say there's a bit of a lag in it at certain intervals. That's where it's coming from. But we can see, but
You can see
the
the
hearing,
slides.
yeah, we can see the slides.
You can hear.
But the hearing is a bit lagged. I mean, there are certain intervals where you don't hear anything at all, and there are moments where you hear, and then sometimes, yeah.
So, but the mic is
I think it's more of an issue with the internet. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think the internet is fast, but keep moving away from the microphone too.
Hello. Hello. Fine.
I want to suggest that you bring a chair, then you sit down, and then you do it directly from here. Then we off the mic. Once the people here can hear us, they may not need the loud sound.
So I should move to.
No, I'll just stand there. Let me on there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, they can hear you on the camera, and you can hear. They can hear. So you can just.
Hello.
Okay. So let's take this. Yes, thank you. Then we bring them. Okay, good. Awesome. Yes. Okay, and then we can. Yes, you can just control your slide from here. Please, can you hear us? Okay. Yes. The slides. You can just use the. Let me pull it here. No, I can just pull it here for you. Other than that, I don't want you to be taking your. Okay, so that those here can also see it. Okay.
So was it here?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much. Apologies for the technical hitches. I believe we'll be able to have a very smooth day after now. So for, like I was saying, the National Insurance Commission currently has a draft regulatory framework. It's about issuing a draft regulations on the sandbox environment. And I was just trying to explain what the sandbox environment typically means. In a sandbox environment, what would happen is that the regulator will create space for innovators to play in a very limited scale, and in order that we are able to see the outcome of the testing that you do on the space, and then the regulator can then decide after testing whether you can scale up your operations. But while you do that, there are effects of your actions on the industry, because you'll be serving consumers and you'll be serving customers. And when we go through the sandbox terms and conditions, you would appreciate how all of this works. What are the advantages? What comes to mind when you have a sandbox environment? What benefits does a regulator seek to derive? when it creates a sandbox environment for the industry. The reason is that globally, innovators are not, innovations move faster than regulations. And because of that, you need to be able to align innovations to regulation. And to do that, you need to ensure that innovations do not disrupt the insurance space. And so you create a sandbox environment that would allow these innovators to play, and the regulator sits as the referee to observe what is happening on that front. It gets to a stage that the regulator can take a decision whether this Insurtechs has a solution that would drive the insurance space or not. Now, once that decision is taken, the regulator would provide a post arrangement that would allow you to become to operate fully or in a very limited scale on the market, or they let you exit completely because your solution may not have any benefits to the insurance space. Now, some of the advantages that can be derived in having a regulatory sandbox environment is that it creates competition among innovators. And you know, where there's competition, there's always the opportunity for growth and expansion. And so when we bring Insurtech firms together to play in a limited scale, we expect to see the experience that consumers are having in terms of the products, in terms of the services that they provide. And then once you drive that they are doing better because they will be able to adjust, they will be able to ensure that they align it in a way that would ensure consumer or customer satisfaction, which for every regulator is the basic and social justifications why regulators are there. Now, another advantage that comes with sandbox environment is that it serves as the enabler for financial inclusion. And so what regulatory sandbox does in the financial services space is that areas that are not included in the financial services. So if you have a lot of our informal sector, which do not have access to insurance and services and so on, if you are able to innovate, it is possible that you can provide a service that go beyond the normal formal sectors to the informal sector. So it allows for financial inclusion, it allows for insurance inclusion. Another advantage that comes with creating a regulatory sandbox environment is that it promotes the expansion of the insurance space. One of the key challenges we've had in Ghana is the fact that our insurance density and insurance penetration is low. When you talk about insurance density, you are looking at the number of people who have access to insurance. So if the insurance density is low, it means that the nation or the people in that country generally do not have access to insurance. Now, when we talk about insurance penetration, you are looking at the growth of insurance relative to the gross domestic product. So you are looking at the gross premiums of the insurance sector as a whole in comparison to the gross domestic product of a country. And Ghana, we have a very low insurance penetration. And one of the key things or driver to expanding the insurance space is to be able to allow for innovators like yourselves to be able to play in the insurance space. And it is also important to state that a great advantage of innovation, creating a sandbox environment, is to be able to align technology and innovation to regulation. Like I stated earlier, innovation is always ahead of technology. Sorry, innovation is always ahead of regulation because on a daily basis, you see people dreaming of new ideas and then practicalizing those ideas. But regulation may not be able to sufficiently deal with all of this. And to be able to align this, you create a sandbox environment, and then you allow these Insurtech firms or these innovators to play. And in a limited scale, you don't let them scale up significantly. Then you monitor their performance, and you try to ensure that they don't go or transgress the already set out regulations and laws in the country. So when you have a regulatory sandbox environment, it actually allows for the alignment of innovation to technology. Now, why do we need a sandbox environment in Ghana? Really, why would we have to have that as part of our regulations? And so typically, like I stated earlier, you want to scale up insurance expansion. And to do that, you need innovation as the main driver. And so these are some of the reasons why we need that. Now, in the sandbox environment, what typically would happen is that you would have to create an environment that will allow Insurtechs, you deliberately create that environment for them to try or experiment their activities. So the law would allow all players in the sandbox environment to test their product. Now, let me state that in a sandbox environment, you can have regulated entities and unregulated entities. So a regulated entity is an entity that already has license with the National Insurance Commission. An unregulated entity may be just like you. You are not regulated, but you're also given space to test your product. So this is to allow even insurers, licensed insurers, when the regulator believes that the new idea or innovations that they are bringing may have some distractions. There are risks that are around it. So in order to have safeguards, the regulator creates that environment for them to operate. It also allows unregulated entities like yourselves to also test your products on that environment. And so that is how the sandbox environment is. Another thing is that it also allows policies to be tailored on coverage and then claims processing. One of the things that we have had on our market is that many firms do not have, they have very poor legacy systems. And to be able to improve all of that, you need to create an environment sometimes to allow them to play. Another challenge is claims, payments, and settlements. The reason why people naturally would insure is because they expect that when they pay premiums and there are claims, they expect all insurance companies to honor them. You pay premiums in the hope that when there is claim, insurers will be able to meet that. And in Ghana, we have these huge challenges. And so we are actually looking around creating innovative ways of giving customer satisfaction. A cardinal principle around insurance regulation is the treatment of customer fairly. We have this customer treated fairly requirement, and every regulator across the globe will require entities that play in the insurance space to be able to treat their customers fairly. And how do you treat customers fairly? You do that through the experience that you give. And many a time, the experience that is given, when it is driven by innovation, you would have customers get access to information quickly, expeditiously, and their service satisfaction would generally be high. So let's look at some of the draft requirements in Act 1061 regarding innovation. Just by way of background, in setting out the new Insurance Acts, the NIC had their eye on expanding the insurance space. We have tried the formal sectors for a long time. There are challenges. And so a key driver was to ensure that you give a lot of innovators the opportunity to play on the market. And that has led to the establishment of a lot of provisions in these acts that seeks to empower innovators to be able to have access to the insurance market to operate. And so we have, as part of the measures to deepen financial inclusion. Please, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, so the regulator, as part of measures to deepen financial inclusion and increase insurance access and ensure that there is efficiency in how insurance business is done in Ghana and so on, in terms of the customer experience and etc., puts in place a number of provisions to improve the insurance sector through innovation. And some of these provisions are in sections 40, 110, 211, 212, 213. There's also one on agri insurance, which is, I think, section 245 of the new Insurance Act. All of these are seeking to allow innovators to play on the market. So we would have the Insurance Commission, the National Insurance Commission, the regulator, issuing what we call innovative licenses to insurers. So some innovative license insurance
Sorry, we can't hear you, or I can hear you. I don't know if anyone else can.
I think he's muted himself now.
I cannot hear him too.
The speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it looks like your mic is either muted or we can't hear you.
I think you're working on it because I can see the video. She's trying to sort it out for him.
Can you hear us?
Hello,
Can you hear us? Is it working? Is it working now? Okay.
Okay. Once again, I apologize profusely for the technical hitch. So the new Insurance Act has a lot of provisions that seek to drive innovation as the main pillar for driving growth, expanding the frontiers of insurance in Ghana, and etc. So, like I was saying, in this new act, it allows for innovative insurers to be licensed. It allows for innovative reinsurers to be licensed. It also allows for innovative intermediaries. And I mentioned earlier that these innovative intermediaries many of you would fall under that category because you will typically not be producing insurance, but you will be providing a service that would allow you to partner other insurance companies on the market. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Can you see our slides now? Okay, cool. No, not yet. Online.
Online, yes, I can.
All right, great. Now, what is the eligibility criteria for entities that want to operate in the innovative insurance space? Let me just state that these are currently guidelines. Sorry, these are currently draft documents, and once it is assented or it is passed, it becomes part of the law. So what we are discussing in terms of the regulatory sandbox environment is actually draft regulations. Much work has been done on that, except that it hasn't been passed by Parliament to law. Now let's look at the eligibility criteria and the duration of innovative insurers or intermediaries on the insurance space. Now, how do you become a participant in the sandbox environment? You must have the capacity as the applicant needs to, you must have the capacity to be able to use technology or innovation to produce a service or a product that is able to drive the insurance space. If you don't have that capacity, you will not be allowed to play on that space. So like, let me just use us as example. When the entry was open for participants to get onto the space, and there were a number of firms, Insurtech firms that applied, but the criteria that was used in selecting you was mainly anchored on the solutions, whether or not your solution has impact on the insurance space or not. And that is actually going to be what would be implemented when this regulatory sandbox environment is created. We want to know whether the service or the technology you are using or the innovation that you are using is able to drive growth, expand the insurance frontier, and etc. It shouldn't be business as usual. Anything that you want to do that is just similar to an insurance, and you need to just get the normal licenses that we have. And so you must have technology, you must have innovation that's able to drive the insurance space. The applicants must also have what it takes to protect the business. Once you are allowed to commence, you should have some minimum capital to be able to operate. You should have some facilities that would allow customers to be able to reach out to you. And all of that are criteria that we look at. Even though for innovators, we do not expect that to be huge, but you should have some minimum amount of access or resources to be able to allow you to operate on the insurance space. And then the innovation or the technology you are bringing on board, it should not be anything that would detrimentally affect the insurance ecosystem. You should not bring any solution that would detrimentally affect how the insurance space operates and so on. So these are some of the things that would be looked at as part of the eligibility criteria. Now, in terms of duration, how long would, for example, once you bridge or you go above the sandbox environment and you are allowed to operate on the insurance space or in the insurance space, what duration of license would be granted? This new regulation, this draft regulation proposes 2 years. And so you would have to operate for a maximum of 2 years. So they can give you 6 months to operate, they can give you a year, but a maximum of 2 years. But you have recourse to actually apply for the extension of the license. And any extension will also be granted on a maximum of 2-year duration. Now, this is just a process flow on how the sandbox environment seeks to operate. So we want to connect innovators and Insurtech firms to insurers. We also want to accelerate the insurance growth using technology and innovation as the main drivers. And we also want to create an environment, like I stated earlier on, the sandbox environment that would allow for testing in small scale the products and the services that you intend to bring onto the insurance space. And then once you reach that gap, you are allowed to operate under some form of license. We also look at what type of license you'll be given, whether you are given a full-fledged license or you are given a targeted license to look at some specific areas. And then the regulator will actually create the enabling environment for all of this to work. Now, how do we look at the execution of this strategy? How is this strategy executed? There are a lot of moving parts. We have the Insurance Act that has requirements on innovators. The regulations on the sandbox environment will also be out, which would give impetus to what is in the Act. And the regulator will sit in the center and leading the whole process. And so what are we really seeking to achieve? And so we want it to be as inclusive as possible, would allow innovators, insurers, companies, regulated entities, and unregulated entities to operate in that space. Now, it is actually a new way of doing things. We are looking at is a new way of doing things. And so the regulator would need to coordinate all of these activities. The regulator coordinates that activities, and then we have the testing of the innovations being done. And at the same time, just a project like this, the InnoLab is one of several things that the regulator is seeking to do to create space for persons who will not even come onto the sandbox environment to be able to have partnerships with entities. So this project actually is one of the key things that the regulator is already thinking about. So you have the NIC and the FSD creating a platform like the InnoLab that allows you to bring your solutions, and then as you go through this process, you will get to a stage where you would have conversations with regulated entities, and you would see that some would show interest in the kind of products or services that you are producing. And so all of this is what the regulator is seeking to drive using this whole innovation and concepts. Now, a sandbox environments are typically environments that have specific requirements. And so there are principles, there are conditions, and there are parameters that every player on that market needs to have. If you don't have those principles, you will not be allowed to operate. If you don't meet those conditions, there are actually condition precedents that you need to meet to be able to allow to. You need to meet all those conditions, and then there are also parameters. And so let's look at some of the principles. So with the principles around it, one of the key principles around this is the fair treatment of customers. I stated earlier on, fair customer treatment is a cardinal requirement in insurance regulation. The regulator's role is typically in protecting the customer. And so whatever solution, whatever innovation that you bring on board must not be detrimental to the general consumer. And so we want you to have that at the we want you to have that at the onset and while you enter onto the market. In terms of the parameters, we're also looking at the limits that we set for the piloting. So like I stated earlier, under 212 and 213, you are given some duration for you to operate on the sandbox environment, beyond which the regulator will take a decision whether your product or your service is fit for market or not. Then another essential requirement when we come to the sandbox environment is reporting. Reporting in the sense that the regulator needs to, on a constant basis, reviewing the activities of the players on that environment. So we want to know how, for example, your activities are being done, whether they are in line with the principles that have been set, whether you meet all the conditions that have been set, and whether or not your operations are ethical. In the next few weeks, you will notice that there is a project or a program that you will be having with the data on data policies. And so you have officers from the Data Protection Authority taking us through what it is that we need to do in terms of privacy of data and etc. How, as a player in that sandbox space, what you need to do with customer information and so on. So all of these are things that you need to typically know or typically have to be able to operate. And like I stated earlier on, this is drafts, and we are getting it into the regulations that will be passed. Now, let's look at the exit strategy. How do you exit the market? I gave insights on how you go through the process, and then there's also a process that leads you out of the sandbox environment. And so we'll look at the exit strategy, the disclosure requirements, and the regulatory safeguards. Now, with the exit strategy, the clear expectation or the expectation of the regulator is that all players in the sandbox environments would be able to, as it were, transition into the insurance space. But that certainly would not happen, because at any given time, the regulator is interested in whether or not your solution is able to enhance insurance operations. And so if the regulator is safe in his mind that the solution or the innovation that you are bringing on board can drive the growth of the insurance sector, it would allow you some space to operate. If not, then the regulator would exit you out of the market safely. Then there are also disclosure requirements that are essential, and players on the sandbox environment must be able to do at any given time. For customers, you'll be dealing with customers on the market, so you need to be able to give some vital information to your customers at any given time. And all players must be able to have give accurate information to their customers at any given time. Now, in terms of regulatory safeguards, regulatory safeguards are just the things that the regulator would put in place to give sufficient comfort that your operation is not affecting the markets or creating material risks for the whole insurance ecosystem. And so regulators would typically require players in the sandbox environment to have in place the adequate measures that would not have a spillover effect on the products and services that they are producing. And so you'll be required to, for example, have indemnity cover for the business that you are trying on the market, so that any effects you have protection. Because for customers, whatever you do, they would not see that as testing, because you provide a service, they pay money, and they have an expectation of a service to be provided. And so you owe them a duty to ensure that what you are doing would not detrimentally affect them. And so you would need to have some covers that provide protection to what you'll be doing. Now, another thing that the regulator looks at in the sandbox environment is the creation of privileges for entities that operate on the market. You know, privileges are not things that are granted of rights. They are given because you fall under a certain special category of people, and so you need to benefit from it. So that is how the regulator sees the sandbox environment. It is a special creature that allows for innovators to play. And so there are privileges that that players on that market will typically get because they derive their operations under a certain special category of law. But it doesn't mean that there are no liabilities. Like I mentioned earlier, you would owe a duty to your clients. And so the privileges you enjoy would be limited. It will not be affected. And so when you do things that would have third-party effects, those third parties may have cause of action. And so you need to understand that even though this environment will create a lot of privileges for you, when you operate and you follow the general principles and you still have some spillover, it will be contained. But if your activities are ultra various to what has been set out for you, then it means that you will owe the customer or the consumers some liability. I also want to mention that this is a special instrument. The sandbox environment is actually a special instrument that the regulator has created or is creating to allow for the testing of products and services. And so unregulated firms can actually get licensing after they go through the process well. It is also an area where the regulator will determine that the innovation being proposed on the sandbox environment may be difficult to be implemented. And so the regulator needs to actually create a waiver to allow for innovators to operate. And let me just state that in the current solvency regime for regulated entities, when we are assessing the solvency of firms, we normally will incentivize firms that invest hugely in technology. So when, for example, you are assessing the capital adequacy of a firm, whether the company is able to meet its obligations. Typically, when you have assets that are not quality assets and you are discounting it. When it comes to technology, the regulator actually incentivizes firms. So firms that invest in technology, they do not have a lot of their assets not counted for solvency purposes. And so the reason is that we want insurance companies themselves to invest hugely in technology to drive their operations. So when you operate in this space, you are expected that you will have you are a special breed of entities. And so there are a lot of protections that are around your operations. Now, once you go through the sandbox environment, you would have to exit at some point in time. Now, what is the post-pilot engagements and actions that may happen? And so based on the outcome of the pilots, if you go through the pilots and the regulator is certain that the project is successful, they would give you some opportunity to operate on the insurance market. So you would have to roll out your product or service on the insurance space. And it may be a typically full-fledged license to operate, or they can give you a targeted license because your innovation is just targeting a special breed of for example, if it is just a weather indexed solution that you have, so you will be given a targeted license to just focus on that area. You may have an innovator that has a lot of services around a lot of areas, and so if that is the case, you can be given the full-fledged. So the license would actually be in stages. It depends on what solution really you are bringing onto the markets. And then there's also this thing about termination of waivers and extension of the license. So if a waiver is granted you, it can be terminated at any point in time. And then your licenses can also be extended. Now, the regulatory reforms. Now, when you go through the sandbox environment, it is possible that the regulator will realize that a number of things need to change in order for you to be able to operate on the insurance space. And so the regulator would have to do some reviews if your product is good for the market, but regulation doesn't typically support that. And so you would have supervisory review or regulatory reviews being driven largely because a sandbox outcome dictates so. And we also have regulatory guidance, and you would have the regulator providing guidance and clarifying how certain regulations or instruments affect innovation and etc. And so just let me also mention that the role of the NIC in all this is to create an enabling environment for innovators to play on the insurance market and to also allow the testing of solutions that the regulator wants to get comfort before it gets onto the market. And so with sandbox environment, you are saying, bring your product, bring your solution, but the solution should meet some key requirements. It should be an innovative solution. It should be a solution that ordinarily would not arise, but for innovation or but for technology. So, and is that solution actually affecting the insurance industry positively? If that is the case, then you would be allowed to be given space to the sandbox environment. That is why we looked at the eligibility criteria. What are the things that you need to meet? What are the preconditions? And so this regulation, when it is fully passed, I know it has been, it is at the latter stage, and very soon it will be passed. So when it is passed, it is going to create the environment for a lot of us to operate. And I also want to mention that this InnoLab project is going to be sustained. So we expect to have several sessions after here, after this first cohort, so that we get a lot of other innovators to play. And what it also means is that there will be much competition, a lot of competition for all of you. And so as you go along this, you go through this process, you should learn and ensure that you improve your services, you make your services fit for purpose, so that ultimately when regulations fully support your operations and you get onto the insurance space, you would have solutions that would be the solutions that insurers and customers would want to have. On this note, I would just state that I have come to the end of my presentation. If there are questions, you can ask. Thankfully, the Deputy Commissioner is online, and so he can assist if I'm unable to provide answers to some of the questions. Thank you. Yes, sir. You can come.
So I have three or four questions. Can I ask them?
Yes, sure.
All right. So my first question is, has the Commission decided on the minimum capital requirement for innovators? That is one. Secondly, when it comes to the partnership between innovators and the insurers, is the decision making done by the insurers, or it is the NIC that makes a proposal of who should partner with the innovator? And then the next question is that during the sandbox period, are the innovators allowed to earn revenue from the work that they are doing? And lastly, is the NIC looking at allowing multiple innovators doing the same thing to operate in a sandbox environment? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let me take the questions one by one. The first question, capital requirements. The truth is that there will be some minimum capital required. Once you say you want to operate on a space, you should have something that can be able to, so you should be able to have an office space to run, such that if worst come to worst, we know where to trace you. But in terms of capital in this stricter sense, you will not have, the requirements will be small. It wouldn't be such that you will not be able to meet that. And so just have comfort that once you have a product or service that the regulator is happy with it, the regulator will enable you to operate. When we were discussing, looking at it, there were provisions around waivers and etc. And some of these things are done in the hope that if there are challenges, the regulator can actually give you space. Because this is a very special product under the whole regulatory framework, and so you can be able to allow. So the most important or critical thing that we should be averting our minds to is whether your solution is going to enhance insurance business in Ghana or increase insurance penetration and so on. And that is at the heart of regulation. That is what the regulator wants to see. Then the second question has to do with the partnerships, whether or not the partnerships that would happen between innovators and insurance companies are going to be led by the regulator. Now, the regulator typically would not lead these regulations. It will create platforms like this to allow you to showcase your solution. Now, on the demo day, you would have a lot of insurers participating, and some of them would contact innovators if they feel that the solutions that you have are fit for purpose. And let me just state that in terms of licensing, because your solution will be on the back of an insurance company's operation, the insurance company will submit an application which would have your solution. And so that typically would be how you'll be licensed if you are using the partnership route. I just lost my line of thought. What was the third question? Okay, so the third question was having to allow if you have innovators producing the same solution, would all of them be allowed to operate on the sandbox environment, as long as those solutions would enhance insurance operations? It will be allowed. Now, when they were doing the assessment for a lot of you to join this space, one of the critical things that they looked at was your solution. So somebody might have a similar solution, but yours may be more advanced. And so because it is competition, you are just giving some few people to operate. Now, in the sandbox environment, you will not give everybody access to operate because you are going to test what you feel would work for the industry. And so once that process goes through, you will not allow. Elias, you can help if okay. All right.
Yeah, but then the other one is whether during the sandbox period, the innovators can earn revenue.
Yes. So yes. So once you are testing, you are actually selling a service on the market, and so except that it is just on a limited scale. So once you are testing, you will be earning revenue.
Ideally, most of the time when you look at the sandbox environment, and basically let us look. Yeah. So sorry, Akwaba. So basically, when we talk about the sandbox environment, there are different types of sandboxes, right? And maybe I'll just give an example on a couple because you asked a very pertinent question. If you have same innovations, what really happens? Now, in different jurisdictions, so for instance, in the UK, the regulator brings those particular innovations in cohorts. You don't just have an open whereby you'll get two companies trying to do the same thing, because also you need to look at the area whereby you are giving them that particular chance to grow and scale that particular innovation. If you have three things that are doing the same thing, that ideally traction will be quite a challenge. So most of the time, what we advise the regulators to do is kind of provide cohort periods. So they'll say, okay, fine, for this particular year, we are only going to allow 4 innovators in our market. Because again, you cannot tell NIC to allow 100 innovators. That would create what we call regulatory arbitrage and can also be disastrous to the market regulation. So most of the time, they need to look at, from the NIC's capacity, how many innovators can we allow at one particular time? Most of the jurisdictions allow up to around 5 innovators in a year. So for instance, if you look at Singapore, they allow only 5, and then they see what those 5 innovators will do in that particular year. Then they open another session for the next year, then they allow another 5 number of companies, all of them with very distinct innovations, just to ensure that you avoid that ability whereby they can get what we call regulatory hangovers, whereby they are chasing all the innovators, they're trying to see what these innovators are doing, and it might not really work for them because also they have the industry to really take care of. So ideally, you'll get that most jurisdictions, 5 innovators in a year, then they see how those particular innovators will turn up. Then they bring another 5 and all that. So it must be a very practical, well-structured process to ensure that, yeah, the risk is also maintained. Another thing you kind of asked is around capital. Most of the time, it will be very difficult for the regulator to just say, okay, fine, this is the amount of capital, because they need to know the quantum of exposure, and that will be highly allowed for you to determine. Okay, on the working side, the office space and everything, you must be able to prove to the regulator that you have all that. But also need to think about, if this particular risk transpires to the contrary, can I be able to pay the Ghanaians? Because most of the time, if they fail to get paid, it can destroy the entire market. Systemic risk becomes a very big issue. So you have to think about, if I want to test with 1,000 people, in case this thing does not work, how much money do I really need to refund all these guys so that they don't go on the street and start carrying placards in the office? At the same time, they run to NIC and look for these guys and say, okay, guys, we were innovating, please go home. They'll come with all the trotros there, making noise on the street. So ideally, that's another component that they have to think about, and we are basically going to provide the guidance on that particular case. I don't know whether I've missed something.
No, you haven't.
Right.
So just to call on the deputy commissioner, if he's listening, to give his remarks on these questions that have been asked.
Okay.
Yes.
So we will do online. Okay.
Correct. I just would like to. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, we can. Yes.
Okay. So I just like to make a remark on one of the questions they asked as to whether the innovators can earn revenue as operating. Yes, but within some constraints, within some limitations. because you are in a test environment, there are limits and restrictions that will be put in around the operation. It could come in terms of geographical restrictions as to where these activities could take place. Could come in terms of the number of customers or the number of policies that you put out there, or even the volume of sales that you may be able to make within whilst you are operating within the sandbox. So the answer is yes, but within limitations until the product is deemed fit for market. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other?
There's a question online.
One offline, because I know that the offline people have so many questions. And so there is a question in the chat. If you can just take that question, Hafiz, and then we move on to the offline people.
I think the question online was, do you have to be physically present in the jurisdiction? And I think that's required. You cannot you cannot operate. Yes.
Oh, can you read the question?
No, it's here.
Okay, so these are the questions. You can see the question here. Yes, excellent. Okay.
Okay.
2 or 3 questions. Okay, we'll take one offline, one online.
Okay, so the first question online, do you have to be physically present in the jurisdiction to be accepted and operate on the sandbox? Yes, because it is, you don't actually have the license to operate. Let me just give an example. So we have had, for example, partnerships between insurance companies and technology firms. Some of them are outside Ghana, but that is allowed because you have a partnership with an entity that operates here. But on the sandbox environment, it is actually a special environment that you need to be present and operate. So you cannot be outside the country and operate on the sandbox environment.
Yeah, so ideally, what happens in a number of jurisdictions, there's what we call the business eligibility requirement. Again, it will be very difficult for NIC, if there is any harm, to get you if you are basically outside Ghana. I don't know whether you have ability to use Interpol. If maybe NIC has Interpol across the world, they'll allow that, but it will be quite difficult. So ideally, you need to kind of meet a basic minimum.
Okay, let's take one more question online, then we can come back to the offline.
Okay, so another online question is, can an innovator decide not to go through the sandbox route, but apply for a license to go straight to markets? Yes, you can apply, but you see, the comfort would be whether the regulator feels your product or service is actually fit for purpose. So if the regulator thinks that no, we need to be able to test to give ourselves comfort that the product or service we are having would not have effect on our market as a whole, then the regulator can decide. But typically, it would be a regulatory decision because the regulator would have to take that decision.
Yeah.
Really.
Let me also chime in that. So ideally, what really happens, if an innovator wants to come right in the market, the only thing that the NIC needs to be highly concerned about is what we call regulatory arbitration. So if you want to come into the market as an insurer, they have the specific laws that will bring you into the market as a full insurer. So ideally, that means that you don't just come into the market with reduced standards of getting in, but you have to comply with all the requirements of an insurer of an intermediary, regardless of how your innovation will be. But that basically will kind of limit your sandbox operation, because sandbox kind of reduces your requirements to operate in a testing environment. So that is something that if you want to come directly, in fact, there's nothing that inhibits an innovator from coming even now, as long as you meet the requirements. And that's why there is a sandbox.
Okay, so let's take one offline.
Let me react to that one.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yes, please. The speaker. Okay.
Hi, can I give a little comment on that question?
Yes.
Okay. So coming directly to the market without going through the sandbox, it means you have to come through an insurance company, because as an innovator, if you are not an insurance company, licensed insurance company, you just cannot introduce products or other things onto the market. So what it means is that you are either setting up a fully blown insurance company, meeting all the requirements and bring your product to the market, or you have an insurance company that will bring the product or the innovation and have the necessary capital to be ready to absorb all the whatever that the product could generate on the market. So yes, you can, but the structures and the scenarios will be different. Thank you.
Can allow questions.
Questions
in the room. Yeah, yeah. Yes. So there's some questions in the room. So guys, yeah.
Then we can take. I think there
are a couple of
other questions.
Okay. So my name is Kwame from Best Food Limited. Okay. So firstly, I would like to thank you for the presentation. My name is Kwame from Best Food. So firstly, I would like to thank you for your presentation. Okay, so my first question is that it appears the sandbox environment are for companies with innovations that are yet to hit the insurance market. So we at Bestcoat already have a product that is on the insurance market. So how does the operation of the sandbox environment affect us? Because we have a product that is already on the market. So that's my first question. My second question is that you also made mention of an insurance innovation license or a license for Insurtech firms. Now, as it stands now, if an Insurtech wants to undertake an intermediary service in the space, they would have to apply for either an agency license or partner with a broker. So does this insurance innovation license, has it come or does it come to replace the need to get an agency license or partner with a broker? The reason why I'm asking is because for us, Bestcoat, for us to be able to do what we do, we have to get an agency license and we also have to partner with a broker. So I would want to know if this license that you made mention of will replace the need for the two. My third question is that, so if an Insurtech firm has a product, has come out with a product and has gone through the sandbox environment, and then wants to tweak the product or update the product or bring more features to the product. So say I have a product that can be used to buy insurance, and then I want to update the product and then make it in such a way that customers can now use the same product to be able to make claims. Does the product need to go through the sandbox process again? So that's also another question that I want to ask and then find out.
So are you done with your questions? 3 questions, or you have additional questions?
Yeah, so follow up on the
okay.
question.
So let him take the 3 questions and then we can come back to you. Thank you. So
thank you very much. I was just wondering if Mr. Ando has heard the questions.
I didn't get all of it. I got some part of his question, but not all of it. My audio is not very
good. So I'll just answer the ones I have remembered, and then Mr. Ando will do the next ones. Okay. So I think your second question, you wanted to know whether, for example, Bestcoat already has a product on the market, and whether.
Yeah, so the second question was that in bringing that product on the market, the first thing is that we have to partner with the broker.
Yeah, I get
we
it.
have to apply for.
Okay, so his question was, does a broker, Best Code that already has a solution on the market, would they have to go back to the sandbox environment again? And I say that once your product is on the market, it is on the market. But remember that Best Codes will be doing other solutions. So your next solutions, it may have to go through a certain process. And then also, you can actually go through the route of insurance companies. So you can go through insurance companies. You can actually be a technical service provider, not just an agent or a broker. You don't necessarily have to go through a broker. You can be an intermediary, but you are just a technical service provider. You are providing a service to an insurance company, and so on.
Maybe I can just add on that. So ideally, in case you're operating now, the sandbox regulations might not affect you whatsoever. So it will kind of look at what other innovations you might have. But again, if you look at the eligibility requirements, they'll kind of want to see that your product is genuinely innovative, because ideally, that is what basically cuts across a sandbox approach and any other approach. So it's not that all the products will go through that particular channel. So they'll be able to set up the stages, or basically ideally indicate what basically means of an innovative insurance, an innovative product. So it's not that now because you are using technology, you'll apply to the sandbox guideline or to the innovative license. There is a difference here. And there is something that I want to make it very clear. It is not that if you are running your products on a technological platform that you qualify to be through the sandbox. It should be a genuinely innovative product or solution that will change the way the market operates. So assume that today you are selling insurance through a technology and it's just the normal way that somebody will still just do it. That does not qualify you to basically go through the sandbox. What is this genuinely innovative thing that will make all the Ghanaians say, wow, that's a totally different way that we've been looking at it? So that's basically what takes you to the sandbox. So it's not that we are selling our products through a mobile phone, then you'll go to NIC that, look guys, I need a sandbox license right now because I'm doing it through the phone. It's not like that. So they'll be able to set up the requirements that they need you to comply with. I think the other thing was around if you change your product. So particularly if a company does a lot of things through technology, you always add additional features in your product. Now, does that qualify to be the sandbox thing? I wouldn't say that would qualify or will not qualify. The key thing again here is what is the innovation about it? What makes it quite different from the way insurance operates in Ghana? Because that is the key thing. These guys want to see more people getting insurance. Let me tell you, it might not only be through technology. Maybe a woman in the market, in a market in one of the Ghanaians, will be able to go and come up with an innovative way of basically bringing those women together. He might come to NIC and he might get a license to test that, because maybe it has trust. We kind of have something we call brand assurance. So if that woman is a brand and he can basically sell the product there and people trust that particular brand, then they can basically get through the sandbox. How different is this particular person doing the thing? So those are things that maybe you might need to think about. So even if you're going to add another feature on top of your product, is it something that is totally different from the way you guys were doing business before? So ideally, that's something that can hit your mind.
All right. So there is also a question, your last question, whether the insurance innovation license will replace the license for agents and brokers. The answer is no. An insurance broker is typically a license given to professionals to provide professional services to people who want to buy insurance and etc. And an agent works for and on behalf of an insurance company. So the agent has a principal, and the principal is an insurance company, and so they would be selling the products of the insurance company, and that is different from having an innovative license, because that license actually is looking at a solution or a technology you are bringing on board on the market that can be able to operate. Now, with Best Quotes, Best Quotes is not a broker. Best Quotes actually is a service provider on the back of a broker, if I understand the arrangement. And so that is also an arrangement that will be allowed on our market. What we are doing is that we would have insurance innovative license, reinsurance innovative license, and insurance intermediary innovative intermediary license. So the intermediary license would cater for all of it. Now, the reason for the sandbox is because the NIC want to control the nature of innovations you bring onto the market. It is not everything that you have to bring and then you are given license. So you need to go through a certain process, and the regulator will be safe in his mind that what you are bringing on board is something that will drive the insurance space. Yes.
Yeah, so definitely the way he has captured it. So ideally, I know from what he is explaining, those would operates more like a platform for people to purchase insurance or like that kind of thing. So it might not change the licensing, and that's why I talked about regulatory arbitrage. You know, NIC also need to be a bit careful on the licensing and the current licensing to avoid that idea whereby you'll get that you as an innovator, you want to get into that market, but if there's a regulatory arbitrage, the insurance companies would just decide, okay, fine, I want to do away with this license. Let me go and get the innovator's license. That basically changes the ballgame because they have the muscle to ideally push for innovations and basically get the right traction very fast. So ideally, the balancing of those licenses need to be done in a very good manner. I think there are a couple of questions online. One person is asking, live testing period for innovations. Are there any considerations of reinsurers as part of this? I think that it's there. But let me also chime in here. Ideally, the reinsurers will highly operate with the innovators, and what maybe they might want to provide is what we call the stop loss gap. So, what you guys were asking about capital, if you want to go to the market, then you realize that instead of bringing all that money that might expose you in case of failure, a reinsurer might say, okay, fine, we want to give you a protection for all your testing. So if a reinsurer comes up with that particular kind of a package to protect innovators, then they basically fall in within that particular category, because again, you'll need a lot of backup from reinsurers. Somebody's asking, any understanding on the regulatory for payment gateways and payment system, especially for charges, for charges for services from companies in the sandbox. Yeah, so okay, payments gateway kind of bring a different ball game, and here is whereby now what NIC needs to do is to kind of get some relationship with the Bank of Ghana and all that, because for a payment gateway, it means that you are basically a deposit-taking institution. And when banking sees anybody collecting money, they have to open their eyes and put on glasses to see what are you going to do on that particular money. Because most of the time, people collect that money, and the next thing, you have taken a flight outside the country and you're enjoying it in Miami on a beautiful beach. So ideally, for payment gateways, what maybe needs to happen, and maybe that to Kwame, there should be a lot of interaction between NIC and Bank of Ghana, and to see how then they regulate issues around payment gateways. And maybe with the interaction that we are going to have in this particular platform, we'll try and engage Bank of Ghana to see what they have to say about that. But that is a very delicate area that maybe NIC might not have the answers, because for any deposit or premium taking, it must be an insurer at any cost. But in terms of payment gateways, then Bank of Ghana has to come in. Somebody is asking if you, I don't know whether you have something on payment gateways.
Not exactly.
Oh, yeah. So another thing, if you partner with a licensed broker, does it limit your innovation to developing broker products?
To developing broker products.
I don't know. What is that? Maybe brokers.
Okay, so there is a brokerage license that is given to professional services provided in the intermediary space. And what you are doing as a broker is to provide professional services to persons who wants to acquire insurances. That is different from providing an innovative service in its strictest sense. So if the NIC reviews your application and it is in line with just a broker's application, you will go through the traditional process of acquiring the brokerage license. But if it is an innovation-led project, which the regulator thinks that you need to go through a process of testing, then you go through the sandbox environment so that the regulator will review the outcome of the testing and then take a decision whether or not you'll be allowed to operate on the space.
Yeah, so maybe just to chime on that, and that basically connects to the other question whereby Doreen is asking. You mentioned that the sandbox environment is for licensed and licensed entities. Now, yes, and this is the case. If a company that has already been licensed has a very innovative idea, they can still go to NIC and ask, can we be able to test this particular solution? Now, what do they mean by unlicensed? You've never gotten any form of authorization from NIC, but you have a solution for the insurance market. So in that particular case, you can still go to them and say, we have this particular idea and we want to test it. So it is basically creating that particular balance in the system, because for an existing company, they might have something very interesting. So for instance, for like Bestwood, you have a license, but you have something that is really, really interesting that you want to test. You can still go and test that particular solution. And that's what basically Hafiz meant by both licensed and non-licensed. How long do you expect the draft to take, Hafiz? Mr. Ando, you are the boss here. Don't tell us 5 years. We'll have retired. Mr. Ando. Okay, fine.
Okay, so let me just state
Yes.
that. Okay, so he's.
How long do you expect your draft legislation to be taken in?
Which legislation?
The regulations on sandbox.
Oh, we are hoping that by the somewhere between the third quarter and the end of the year, we would have these regulations finalized.
So thank you, Mr. Ando. And maybe also I needed to just go back to the person that asked that question. What you should be asking, will I have an innovation ready by the time this law gets to be passed? Because most of the time, and this is something that I've been observed all over the world, regulators come with a sandbox, then there is no one who comes to that particular space, because people thinking is quite difficult, and I agree. So and that's why we have this particular process, the InnoLab kind of an approach, whereby we want to create a pipeline of innovators that will go to that particular space. Most of the time, sandboxes are created and no one comes, and that's why the world has kind of now pushed back and tried to kind of spur innovation and catalyze ideas through people that have never been in that particular space, for instance, like insurance, to innovate. So as Ms. Anto says, in the third quarter, and we'll be back here to launch the draft. Sure. So with all of you guys. Yeah, so this last question before I take one in the room. What are the steps to apply to join the sandbox, and when is the deadline? I think that will be more on the regulations. So I think you can just hold your horse and kind of start working on your innovation by 10th of this month, this year. There will be something coming through. Maybe I can take one question in the room.
Yes. Can we have someone who has not?
Yeah.
Then we come back to you.
Then you come back, yeah.
Thank you. At least you are here after networking, you can serve as a list of questions.
Yes, about 2 of them.
2 of them, all right.
Yes. So I wanted to know, you mentioned a couple of things with regard to license.
Okay, so Hafiz, you mentioned a couple of things regarding license. First, you mentioned micro insurance, mobile insurance, and then technical service provider. Then next, you came to innovative insurer, and innovative intermediary. These are a bit, there are thin lines between them as to the definition of who fits or which Insurtech fits into which space, because an Insurtech could fit into technical service provider or a micro insurer, and at the same time be an innovative insurer. So I would be grateful if you are able to clarify this a bit. Then the other one is sort of a follow-up to this. With regards to what he said, if you are working with an insurer, can you then be an insurance agent as an Insurtech, or you will still have to go through an innovative insurer? We will have to get some clarity to all this.
So thank you very much for these questions. If you noticed, when I spoke about the micro insurance conduct rule, the mobile insurance, and then the technical service providers, with the micro insurance, all of these, when I spoke about them, I did that on the back of the old Insurance Act, Act 724. I said that Act 72 was limited in terms of how it allowed innovators to play on the market, except that the National Insurance Commission had the legal mandate to issue directives and guidelines. And on the back of those guidelines and directives, the NIC issued the micro insurance conduct rule. Then it also issued the mobile insurance conduct rule, and then the licensing of technical service providers. So the micro insurance, the licensing of the technical service provider is just the application process, what you need to have to be able to get license. And so you can actually be a technical service provider providing mobile insurance or providing micro insurance. And so that was the context in which I explained that, because we're looking at Act 724 and the fact that the regulator was trying to create space for innovators to operate. Now, in this new act, there has been direct or clear provisions in the act that makes it possible for innovative intermediary license to be given. And all of this would fall under that kind of arrangement.
Yeah, okay, fine. You might be asking, why does this guy know too much about Ghana? Yeah, okay, fine. I've worked with NIC for so many years here. So ideally, if you look at the way that law has been structured, we need to kind of demarcate between the licensing that is currently existing. So for instance, we've talked about microinsurance, you've talked about TSP, you've talked about issues around agents and insurance companies. So within that, there are always what we call the capital requirements for those particular lines of business. So for a microinsurer, NIC has stipulated what capital they require. For a TSP, they have stipulated what capital they require. For an agent or an intermediary, there are those capital requirements that are there, ideally kind of creating very distinct lines around it. Now NIC has come up with something that they're calling an innovative insurer, an innovative intermediary, and an innovative reinsurer. Now, those are just names. All those three licensing, it's not that you are going to be given a license under that particular name or something like that. But ideally, what brings life to that is the sandbox regulation. The law has just kind of given a very wide idea of an innovative license, an innovative insurer, an innovative license, which can be an innovative insurer, an innovative intermediary, and an innovative reinsurer. So in that particular case, what brings life to this is the sandbox. Now, the sandbox will be able now to create those demarcations. So for instance, if somebody wants to has an innovation that will kind of carry risk, because an insurer is basically somebody that carries risk. And that basically means that in the sandbox, you want to go out to the market, sell your product, and collect premiums, and wait for that risk to happen, and pay that particular claim. So in that particular case, you'll get a license through the aspects of the regulatory sandbox that you are an innovative insurer for a particular period of time. Now, if you have time lapses, NIC will expect you to now meet all the requirements of an insurer that operates in the market. So there will be that transition, and that's why he talked about the exit strategy. So the exit strategies can be many. So for instance, you as an innovative insurer, you will say, okay, fine, me, I want to exit as a micro insurer. So you won't go and collect all the capital that is required for a general insurer or a life insurer. You'll exit through that particular line. Somebody might say, I have enough money, I want to exit, not as a micro insurer, I want to exit as an insurer. So that is what the demarcation. So I hope that now you get where those lines are. So for instance, somebody comes through the sandbox and he becomes an innovative intermediary. Ideally, an intermediary can get out in so many ways. You can either get out as a broker or as an agent. So at that time of transitioning and exiting, you'll have to decide, I want to operate as an agent. So you'll meet all the requirements of an agent. Or I want to exit as a broker. So you'll meet all the requirements of a broker. But through the sandbox, you'll be able to have some criteria that will enable them to have some comfort that in case of anything happens, you are well sorted. I hope that we've answered that.
Yes. So there was a last question on the issue of agents, if I can recollect. You mentioned that the licensing of agents, how will this affect it? An insurance agent's license is a license given to insurance companies, persons who work for and on behalf of insurance companies. So an agency license is just given for you to sell an insurance company's products, but it has nothing to do with the innovation, because once you bring an innovative idea, it should fall under another bracket, not an insurance agent, because what the agent typically is doing is having the products of the insurance company and getting people to sell the products. Can you speak so that our online?
I want to sell for one particular.
Partnership
we are talking about.
Yes, so that is different from.
Necessarily have to go through the sandbox, or as it were, I can just engage the insurer and say, I have a solution that can sell your product, and it's you I want to work with, and so I can just do the partnership with the insurer and go to market.
That can happen.
That's allowed. In fact, we answered this question. No, that's not an agent.
Or it's part of the sandbox.
So that's
the clarity I want.
Yeah, okay, fine. For that particular case, and that is something that NIC is clear about. So for instance, right now, if you want to distribute a product for a particular company, you can do that. The only thing that maybe now you need to get from NIC is just give me a license of an agent. Then you can go into partnership with that specific insurer and sell, because an agent belongs to the company. So in fact, you mess, these guys will kind of even ask the company, why did you use this particular person that messed the market? Because an agent represents the company. So the only thing that maybe they also need to do just to be comfortable is to get traction of what kind of agencies this particular company uses. So that partnership is allowed. Yeah. Yes. Okay, somebody is saying, Hafiz, there's somebody with a very good innovation. He's saying, Hafiz, can I come tomorrow in the office? I have a very innovative motor insurance product. Do I have to wait for the sandbox? So he's telling you, please don't wait for the sandbox of coming. Okay, fine. The thing is that you can still meet a fees, but maybe, they have no jurisprudence to maybe allow you to operate now until maybe the sandbox regulations are done. And maybe what you might think you might need to think about, is it not PIN? You might think about partnering with an insurance company at the moment if you don't really want to wait for that, because if it's a very good innovation, it will be great. Maybe you start some discussions with companies as you wait for those particular sandboxes to get the right traction. Right.
Well, Elias, let me also say that not promising anything, but it is possible for us to look into the possibility of issuing some interim directives under which anything that emerges out of this could be tested and prepared for the market. So let's keep our fingers closed.
Right. So ideally, what you're hearing from the boss is that you can start talking to them, then they can see what they will do. That's very good, Mr. Kofi Ando. Right. So maybe we can take one last question in the room, and a very last one from the team joining us online. So maybe you can just come. They can see your face.
Thank you very much. So my question is about getting the innovative license based on a company which is coming out from Ghana, like a foreign company, because Venu is actually not a Ghanaian, it's a company. I'm part of the cohort. So I'm looking at, is the law actually flexible on based on the innovative license on the company which Insurtechs come from outside?
Let me defer this question to the Deputy Commissioner.
Kofi, welcome back. Can you allow a company? You can unmute if you have not, if you are muted. Hello, Kofi. Okay, I think we had answered that. But anyway, Kofi, yeah, it's your own.
Elias. Hello, Hafiz.
Yes, we can hear you, please.
Okay. Yes. Sorry, I didn't get a question. What was the question directed at me?
Let me just repeat the question. The question is, can you allow a foreign company to test in the sandbox without being present in Ghana?
There are risks, and you alluded to part of the risks earlier on. We need to have a hand on some of these things, and it's going to be difficult to keep a hand on it. So for now, I'm not sure I can say yes, but let's think through the risks and come back later on this. But now I can't say yes, because I find it difficult to find out how we're going to be able to manage the risk.
Right.
I don't know. I absolutely answered, but I hope that set you at rest.
And this is something that the question is this: are there restrictions for foreign ownership of companies against the non-foreign ownership? So, for instance, here you'll get that a company will establish in Ghana, but it is foreign owned, compared to a company that is locally owned but is established in Ghana. Is there some restrictions on foreign ownership? I know in some jurisdictions they require like 25% of a company to be locally owned. Would you allow 100% foreign ownership of our company that go through the sandbox?
That's an issue that needs to be discussed. Currently, there are no restrictions on foreign ownership of our regulated entities, insurance companies, reinsurance companies. But with respect to the sandbox, this is not a question that is answered yet. And so we'll have to come back on this and provide. I hope that the questions that we have not been able to give clear answers, someone will compile them so we can come back on them.
Thanks, Kofi. And maybe I'll just give a typical way that it has been done in various jurisdictions. And again, we've seen in various jurisdictions, like for that particular case, the regulator might require at least 25% to be locally owned, because again, you don't want all the revenue and all that to get outside Ghana. So ideally, you can allow up to 75% of that company to be foreign owned, but at least 25% of that to be locally owned. So that is something that happens, for instance, in Kenya, whereby there are sandbox regulations. The only requirement is that if it's a totally foreign owned company, they must have at least 25% ownership, that is locally, of the ownership of that particular company. And something maybe as Kofi and the team thinks about it, they might also look at other jurisdictions on how the practice is done. Right, so I think we are coming to an end. I don't know whether I can make a couple of remarks and we can call it a day. So if there is no any question from the team, mine is just to really appreciate the time and maybe just by a quick way of introduction. I'm Elias Omondi. I work for FSD Africa. I'm a senior manager in charge of FSD. And this particular program is a program that we initiated some time back. The idea started in 2019 in a conference in Germany. Then after that, we came back to Kenya, Nairobi. By that time, I was working for the insurance regulator. I've worked for the insurance regulator for the last 10 years, but I've also done a bit of work for the World Bank, the IMF, working with NIC, close to around 18 regulators in Africa. I've supported them to basically come up with the regulations. And last year I moved to FSD, whereby I'm now a senior manager in charge of regulations. So my work is predominantly looking at regulations and trying to create an enabling environment, because one of the things that have been cited is that regulatory clarity is not there. And most of the time for innovators or businessmen, the reason why they kind of fear from getting into the market is because they don't really understand these regulations. So we are highly working with institutions such as NIC to create that particular platform that will catalyze growth of Insurtechs, at the same time give them support. So this support is in form of technical support, and that is something that you're currently getting. On top of that, as FSD Africa will be providing financial support. So we've been providing grants to a number of institutions across the world, and as an organization, we've committed for the next 3 years that we are going to really support the Insurtechs across the continent, technically, but also financially. And once you go through this particular program, we'll basically put you into what we call a post-engagement program, an InnoLab post-engagement program that will enable you to access funding from our institution, whereby for the innovations that we'll be creating, we want to basically enable you to scale those particular innovations. Currently, that is the space that we are currently doing in Kenya, whereby now a team of 20 innovators are now going through a post-engagement program. We are happy because of the progress that we've seen in Kenya. Like one of the companies that was doing telematics have already signed up with Toyota to provide telematics in Africa. So that's a very good platform whereby now you see a bit of traction, a bit of growth. Some companies have gone ahead and kind of signed partnerships, and they are currently, their products are currently being sold by the existing insurance company. So also we want to create what we call an ecosystem of these innovators to interact with the incubators, because for us to change Africa, we cannot do it alone. We have to work as a team. One of the other key things is that the insurance penetration is low. And maybe if you talk to the likes of Afiz and Mr. Kofi, and they want to ensure that Ghanaians are protected. Now, how do we get Ghanaians protected? It's by all of us creating solutions that speak to their needs, but also providing the accessibility. Now, have we been doing that? Yes, on a scale, but we want to ensure that now this becomes part of us. We want to create solutions that will enable those particular Ghanaians that are currently exposed to various risks so that if in case they face those particular risks, they are at a particular point whereby they can get back. It is said that most of the time, if a risk of death or sickness hits an African community, it basically takes them back to poverty. Why? If they had a cow or they had some form of an asset or land, they end up selling that particular land in order to meet this particular risk. The levels of recovery of that particular asset becomes nearly impossible. So ideally, risks tend to take Africans back to poverty than even other parts of the world. So how then do we ensure that we highly protect them around, enabling them to ensure that in case they are facing a particular form of risk, they have a way of getting out. Now, keenly, as an organization, as FX Africa, we are funded by the UK government, and what we do is ideally work also with financial markets, and it's not only on the insurance side that we kind of operate. We operate in the capital market side, and we've launched quite great products. For instance, the green bonds in Africa, we are the institution that have launched that. We've launched even the gender bonds in parts of West Africa, and I think the gender bonds have been launched in Nigeria, whereby we've been working with the Nigerian government. So this is an opportunity for all of us, and what I would want us to do is that let's be committed. Let's start thinking widely on how we can transform Ghana. The resources are there, and we are committed to provide the necessary resources. We are committed to get the necessary expertise. We are committed also to guide you, to ensure that if you are walking on those particular streets, Ghana will be safe. And the reason why we want to create that particular safety is that no one will ever come back to you, because most of the time, if there's a risk in my community, they look for the guy that they think earns the most. And most of the time, in an African setting, if you have any form of income, you'll get that instead of just meeting the needs of your family, you're meeting the needs of the community. So if you guys want to continue meeting the needs of the community, don't help us to solve the challenges of this particular continent. But one of the key things that we believe is that we can change Africa. And Africa can only be changed by all of us that understand the needs of an African setting. So ours is just to really appreciate, and first, and I want to congratulate you for making it. I know it was quite competitive. We had so many people trying to be part of this. The only thing is that we can only take a couple. It doesn't mean that we are not going to do much more in Ghana. We've committed to still continue supporting NIC. We've committed to continue supporting you even after the end of the 3 months. The key thing is that come up with a solution. If you are doing this thing now, think about the people outside there. Come up with something. And I can promise you, we are ready to use you as an example to take you all over this particular continent to change. Also about that, we are soon launching an R3 lab, and that basically now brings in all the regulators in Africa, because we believe if there's a solution in Ghana, this solution can still work in Kenya, and we want to create what we call Insurtech passport, whereby you can still push your product outside Ghana and basically take it to Kenya. A Kenyan can bring it here, because we believe that for an African setting, we can work as a community. So we are creating an Insurtech community that will not only remain at the borders of Ghana, but can really cross across the continent. So we believe that for us to do that, we have to create solutions now. The last thing is that we are working closely also with a couple of organizations, and we will be awarding the top 3 innovators in this cohort. So it's not an issue of just doing the bare minimum. You know, in Kenya, there's what we call the bare minimum team. The team that comes to the meeting when it's about to end, just to, you know, the way people bring the head out in the door, like for people to know that you are there. Then, so for you to avoid the bare minimum thing, be present, get the full use of this particular platform, and come up with a solution. We will select the top 3 and we'll be awarding those top 3 companies based on their solution. So mine is just to really appreciate you and congratulate you, and we are here to support you on behalf of FSD Africa and behalf of our other partners. I know we are in partnership with GIZ Ghana. I know Angela might be on the line. Angela, thank you very much for supporting us, and in fact GIZ will be our award partners, so they are basically going to provide the award to those particular top 3 Insurtechs. FSD, we are basically funding the entire program, but also we are going to provide grant funding at the end of this particular period for those particular innovations that need to be scaled. I know we are working with Mobile Web Ghana. Thank you, Florence, for all the hard work, and I believe that she will be with you here locally. Maybe we might be in other parts of this particular continent, but you can always talk to Florence on anything that is needed. I think maybe Florence, you might even tell them that your space is available for further discussions if they need to. I know we are also working with our partners, Stylistic, Emma and Antonia and the rest of the team. It's great that you will be providing the necessary support. But on top of that, we are working with BFA Global, the biggest catalyst fund that provides grants to top innovators across the world. So Catalyst Fund has joined this, and they'll also be having sessions with you on what you need to do to become a good innovator in the future. So again, we appreciate the work that BFA Global and the Catalyst Fund will be doing on this particular program. On behalf of NIC, I think NIC are the most innovative regulator in Africa. So we need to appreciate them. NIC for really giving us the knowledge this part of the morning and afternoon. I believe that for Ghana, you are basically privileged to have such a forward-looking regulator. Most of the time, the regulators don't want to see young people and innovators. They'll tell you, please go do that thing and never mention that you came to this office, right? So it's more of like, go do it, but if you mess them, still come and arrest. That's the funniest thing with the regulators. They'll tell you, please never mention you came here, but if you mess, they'll still come with a policeman and arrest you. Now, here we have a very open regulator that tells you, come we discuss, come and approach us and let us make a change. So thank you very much. And we'll be having other sessions. I know this will not only be the session that we are going to have, we are going to have at least 3 other sessions with you on a physical basis for us to really continue having these discussions. Thank you, and Florence, back to you.
Thank you very much, our online audience. This is where we bring the program to an end for the online audience. For the offline audience, it's time for us to network, get something to eat, and to also talk among our